You do not have to attend every fight to which you are invited. Remember that. It's a great rule for life. Stephen Karpman, Karpman, was a student of a guy called Eric Berne. Now, Eric Berne was a psychoanalyst and a psychotherapist who came up with a model of communication called Transactional Analysis, which you may have heard of. If you haven't, it's a useful thing to have a look at. I love the George Box quote, "All models are wrong, some models are useful." Transactional analysis is quite useful because it helps you to articulate and to analyse the way in which two people interact with each other and communicate with each other. The idea being that the sender sends a message and the receiver receives the message, and that message, that one parcel of information between sender and receiver, is a transaction. And the sender will send the message from an ego state, which is either the parent ego state or the adult ego state or the child ego state, and the receiver will receive it in his or her ego state, be it parent, adult or child. And basically the idea is that your adult is always the optimum way of communicating, all things being equal, because the adult ego state is purely logical, it's entirely rational, and everything is fact-based. So it either is right or it isn't right. It's empirically evidenced, and we can have a sensible, grown-up adult conversation which is purely based on the facts. However, if you've ever met people, which I'm assuming you have, you'll know that most conversations are not like that. So, what are they like? They're a bit of a mixed bag. And that mixed bag comes from the fact that we are constantly switching between different ego states depending on where we are in the conversation and where we think that they're coming from. And we do this entirely unconsciously, for the most part, switching between these different ego states which we have learned through our early childhood. And the analogy that's usually used to explain how we learned those early childhood scripts is one which, actually the analogy itself is kind of dated now because it talks about a tape recorder. And for our younger viewers, a tape was a audio cassette which allowed you to record and then play back audio information. I know, spooky. So imagine that you've got these two tape recorders, tape decks, and you press record on the day that you were born, and then around about the age of 7 you press stop, and those tapes are now indelibly marked for the rest of your life. And every time something happens, one of those tapes kicks into action and plays back a script that was learned very early on in your childhood. So the tape that's recording all of the parent voices, it might be a parent, it might be a guardian, it might be an older sibling, is simply playing back authority scripts. And those authority scripts might come in a judgmental tone of voice, which we might call the critical parent voice, or more of a nurturing and supportive tone of voice, which we call the nurturing parent. Or it might be from the child tape recorder, and the tape recorder that's the child ego state is really playing back is all about feelings. And the natural child, the free child, will just basically be pure unalloyed emotion. It's joy, it's fear, it's sexuality, it's sensuality, it's any kind of unfiltered emotion. However, unfiltered emotion in our society is not really acceptable from our social mores, and it tends to get, I suppose, to some extent, damped down a little bit and filtered and corralled through your early experience, these first 7 years. And so typically the kinds of things that get played back from the childhood scripts from the child ego state are what we call the adapted child. And the adapted child is really emotions through a filter. And those emotions through a filter might well be seeking attention or approval. And they'll come out in various different sorts of guises. So it might be quite a compliant and conscientious voice that basically does and says the things that it thinks the other person wants. That very often comes out in reaction to the judgmental tone of the critical parent. Or it could be more of a rebellious child, which is basically where they, if you'll forgive the bluntness of the phrase, stick two fingers up to whatever is being asked of them, because acting out in that way can sometimes at least get attention. Even if it's not positive attention, some attention's better than none. Or it could be what we call the little professor, which is that sort of slightly show off, I'm the cleverest person in the class, I'm the cleverest kid in the room, give me attention that way. And to some extent you'll recognise all of these different tones of voice. So depending on the messages you receive, you're going to automatically respond from one of these different ego states. And there's a lot of nuance in that. So let's loop back round to where I started this video and talk about drama and the fact that you do not need to attend every fight to which you're invited. A lot of dysfunctional disagreement, a lot of clashes occur because attention is not always a positive thing. And the tension of drama can have its own rewards. They're very unpleasant rewards, and they're the sorts of rewards that maybe are hidden in plain sight, but they're the rewards of basically getting drawn into something and feeling completely immersed in something and having an almost cathartic experience of emotional release. So there's a lot of adapted child in here, but it's not good, it's not healthy. And what you'll find is that there's a thing called the drama triangle, and this is the Stephen Karpman model, where in order for drama to take place, you typically have at least two, if not all three, of the points of this triangle filled in. And one of the points is the victim. And the victim has this sort of, oh, woe is me, the world is against me, it's everybody else's fault, slopey shoulders, I take no accountability for my own actions, I take no responsibility for my own actions, whine, 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 moan, moan, moan. Never says anything positive. If you say something or make a suggestion to them, they always answer, yes, but. And we all know that the adage, everything before but is BS. So they basically deny whatever you've said by using the word but. They just want to argue. And in order for there to be a victim, there must be a persecutor. Now, the persecutor doesn't even necessarily need to be present for the victim to actually, well, start playing that role, that victim role. It might even be some amorphous persecutor, like they are always against me, or the traffic was against me, or something like that. But more often than not, they'll moan about a particular individual, and that individual is cast in the role of persecutor very often when they're not even in the room, which invites the other person, the person that they are typically moaning to play this third role, which is the rescuer. Now, if you overlay what I was just talking about, transactional analysis, onto those three roles, you can see very clearly where they're coming from. And this is the really important bit, you also start to get a hint of how to get out of drama and avoid it altogether. So, your victim is really an adapted child. They're wanting attention, and they're trying to attract it in a very negative way. It's actually the rebellious child. But the rebellious child in a very emotionally unintelligent mode. The persecutor is really somebody who's cast in the role of the critical parent. Or, actually, if they are in the room, somebody who casts themselves in the role of critical parent. You can almost hear the wagging of the finger as they speak. And the rescuer. The rescuer. This is, in many respects, the most seductive and dangerous of the three, because it is so easy to pour petrol on the fires of drama by getting sucked into being the rescuer. And the reason it's a seductive role is because actually, when you play that role, you think that you're helping. It's quite difficult for either a persecutor or a victim to truly, honestly think that they're helping. But a rescuer always thinks they're helping, which is why it's the most difficult one to avoid. Now, if you look at that from a transactional analysis point of view, the rescuer is actually the nurturing parent, but it's a sort of dark twin to the positive nurturing parent. Instead of being empowering and supportive, it's almost mollycoddling and disempowering. It's wrapping somebody up in cotton wool and saying, don't worry, I've got this, I'll look after you. It creates learned helplessness in the victim, who sits there mollycoddled and mummied and wrapped up in their little cotton wool suit so that the nasty, nasty world can't get hold of them and can't hurt them. Which means that they have effectively now got their champion, their rescuer, who very quickly can then be cast in the role of victim themselves, because they effectively put themselves in harm's way. And so the whole cycle of who is persecutor, who is victim, and who is rescuer can go round and round and round and round, and you end up in a negative spiral of drama. And that is to be avoided at all costs. So how do you avoid it? Well, the first thing is, remember this acronym, STEP, S-T-E-P, stop. When you spot somebody being a victim, or indeed being a persecutor, or even more so being a rescuer if you do spot it, stop. That's the S in STEP. Take a deep breath. Maybe even do some box breathing, which is this Navy SEALs technique where you breathe in through your nose for the count of 4. You hold it for the count of 4. You breathe out for the count of 4. You wait for the count of 4, and then you breathe in again for the count of 4. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4. That's why it's called a box breathing. That slows your heart rate. It gives you time to respond rather than merely to react in the moment. So you stop, you take a breath. That's the S and the T. Then you examine. You go into your adult ego state and you examine it in the cold light of day. You look at it as rationally as you possibly can, because you've given yourself time to catch up and not think emotionally. Once you've examined things on their merits, then and only then do you move to the P, which is proceed. And when you proceed, you deliberately choose which ego state you are going to speak from. Typically, it's a good idea to choose the positive, nurturing parent, and to be empowering and to help the victim character to lift him or herself out of being a victim, to help the persecutor character to calm down and to see things more rationally and to be more objective. Now, there are only really 2 ways to get inside somebody else's head. One is to tell a story, and the other is to ask a question. When you ask a really good, insightful question, and you do it from a really positive place, with great nurturing tonality. So you're not trying to catch anybody out, you're not trying to be patronising, you're not trying to be condescending. You are asking a genuinely curious, open, supportive question, and you are meaning it in that way. You're not trying to sort of have the fight tacitly. You're genuinely curious and supportive. Then instead of being a persecutor, you can be a challenger. Instead of being a rescuer, you can be more of a coach. And instead of actually being the victim, if you found yourself potentially being cast in that role, well, you can become the creator of a solution. Because in that particular role, instead of asking questions, what you might do is you might start making suggestions of ways in which you yourself might have behaved differently in order to achieve a different outcome. So instead of, oh God, it's not fair, oh woe is me, I'm always late, the traffic's always against me, and instead of that kind of whiny victim mode, you say, traffic was really bad today, looks like there's some roadworks, they're going to be going on till the next couple of weeks. So I'm just going to actually have to find a different route to work, or I just need to get up 15 minutes earlier every morning for the next couple of weeks so that I actually turn up on time. Apologies for being late. And that puts you into a much more healthy mindset, and it means that you can step, STEP, out of drama. Hope that's helpful.